Our speaker today is Mr. Tom Bowen. Tom Bowen is Executive Vice President and one of the original principals of the Williams Group. Earning degrees in marketing and advertising from the University of Nebraska, he is also the co-founder of Practice Coach, Inc. Tom has spent 35 years coaching practice owners and teams in the areas of practice growth and team development, and has developed and delivered programs for some of the largest and most recognized companies in the healthcare industry. He has published hundreds of management marketing texts and articles as former editor-in-chief of the Practice Owners Review and Operations Management Review. As former client creative director for Williams Group and the Silvermark Agency, Tom has also created, written, and produced hundreds of successful internal and external promotional campaigns. He is a member of the Academy for Healthcare Marketing and a renowned lecturer and consultant worldwide on organizational management, developing human capital and team performance, team vision and mission, internal and external marketing, consumer behavior, and greater personal achievement. Welcome, Tom.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Cheryl, and welcome everyone to a conversation about growth. And to which one might say in these times, wait a minute, really? Growth? And I would say to that, absolutely growth. I'm totally certain of it because fortunately, as we'll discuss here, we control it. And so as we endeavor to have this discussion about growth, I think maybe it's helpful to talk about for a moment here, what exactly is growth? And I've thought about that a lot, and I would tell you that growth really is four things, four simple things. Number one, growth begins with a patron's perception of value. That is the first and foremost thing we impact when we think about growth. And having consulted with our colleagues with optometric practices now for 35 years on this as one of my main topics, I have learned that really we can't do much else until we've understood, in terms of growth that is, until we've understood the importance of choosing to control perception of value. So that's one. Secondly, patient retention. So when we talk about retention, we're going to illustrate this in a moment, but I'd like to say average retention. It doesn't do the patient or the practice any good if we've retained them. In other words, they haven't left the practice to go elsewhere, but they haven't been in 3 years. So retention, when it's not active retention, can do more harm than good. It's not a good thing for the patient. It's not a good thing for the practice. So it has to be active retention. Number three, revenue per patient. One of my favorite subjects. Anybody that has been in my audience before knows that this is when I jump on tables and play instruments and jump up and down. This is one of my favorite subjects because it costs not one dime to grow your revenue per patient, say 20% tomorrow. It's the most immediately impactable, and in these times, as others are imparting their paradigms about this new normal, this new economy, what I want to make sure we don't do is listen to them. What I want to make sure we do is understand that things like revenue per patient are a result of the perceived value that occurs in a conversation with you and your patient. They are not the result of what the stock market did today. And number four, new patients. You know, it's interesting. A lot of times in a conversation about growth, I'll hear people say, you know, I need to get more people through the door. And actually, that has not been my experience at all. My experience is that there have been plenty of people through the door. And so getting people through the door is very important. But what happens in the patient life cycle once they've been through the door is actually vastly more important, many times more important to growth. So there you go. That's it. Just 4 things: perception of value, patient retention, revenue per patient, new patients. There's a chronology there. Those are the 4 things we want to affect. And it's very simple. We need a set of initiatives that cause these things to be impacted in this order, and we're going to talk about some of those initiatives tonight. You know, as I work with colleagues and we talk about growth, I learned that growth is an objective. I've also learned that there are 3 motives, 3 things that would be our motive to grow the practice. One, and probably one that is in season at the moment, is fear. I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't grow. So fear can be one motive. Another is, and a much more powerful and lasting motive, is ambition. So fear is do this or else. Ambition is do this and get this. And ultimately, the greatest of these, the greatest of the 3 motives, is purpose. So fear is do this or else. Ambition is do this, get this. Purpose is do this and experience your greatest joy because of the successes. You see, my motive is based on marketing rule number 6, which is simply, we'll talk about the marketing rules. If it's good for the patient, it's good for the practice. And the thing that will cause the most growth is directly proportionate to the highest quality of life of the patient. So let's grow the practice because we're purpose-driven and not because we're afraid. I think that's maybe the part of the message that's been missing. So I'd like to illustrate it this way. Think of your practice as the water glass. Think of your market area. So maybe it's New Hamburg or wherever you practice. Think of that as the pitcher. And so what we need to do is ask ourselves a simple question. Do we need all the water? And then imagine that picture there on your screen. What would happen if we dumped it all into that glass? Obviously, we'd have a terrible mess. In fact, most of the water that's in that pitcher, we do not want. That doesn't mean there are people that from which we deliberately turn away and don't want to serve. There are certainly people that aren't a match to be your patients and people that are. But this isn't about turning people away. What I'm saying is, if your glass does not leak, and tonight we can talk about methodology to ensure that. If that glass does not leak, then all we need is a trickle. Think of what's coming into the glass as new patients. If we've been in business 10 years or more and we have 12% new patients, that glass should be overflowing. I mean, it should literally be overflowing over the top. And if it isn't, and we have 10 or 12% new patients, then we know exactly where our opportunities are. So, as we think about the situation that we're in as a profession, as a continent, as a world, as colleagues, as brothers and sisters going through this thing together, what do we need to come out of this? What do we need to do to come out of it? It's very simple. I've thought about it for hundreds of hours. We need to implement a set of initiatives that makes it impossible for the glass not to be full, and nothing more. We need not be fearful. We need to acknowledge that we control those initiatives. We need to acknowledge that we control the level of the water in the glass, period. And we need to understand that we do not need all the water. So if all the water isn't available to us in that pitcher, it's perfectly okay. I was in Australia when it hit the fan with this virus, middle March. I was on a world lecture tour, and for the first time in 35 years, I was forced to bail. In fact, I had to get to Toronto from Chicago one time in the middle of a blizzard, and flights wouldn't go, and I was able to get a car and drove all night through the blizzard, kind of like the mail carrier, right? And I made it, and I didn't go to bed, and I washed my face and changed my clothes and gave my lecture. But for the first time ever, I had to bail. And it was very disturbing. It's when I really came to grips with the seriousness of our situation as a world. But I vowed to the audience as we parted ways that I will be back in February with one simple mission, and that's to fill the glass, which is exactly what we're here tonight to do. We're here to fill the glass. And there we go. I did an article, believe it or not, in 2011. And it was called The New Normal. The article was actually called The New Normal. And what I'd like to do is just read. This was the cover story of Eyecare Business. I believe it was February of 2011. I'd like to just do a reading from that article. See if any of this sounds familiar. Here we are again. All right. As the broader economy recovers in the decades ahead, yes, decades, there is a new normal. A new set of conditions, challenges, opportunities, competition, distribution methods, and consumer behavior that will demand a whole new outlook and way of practice owning and operating life. We'll endeavor here to dissect a few pieces of that new normal and consider ways to leverage the opportunities that come with it. The new normal starts with the patient. Notice the subhead says the patient and not your patient. That's the first and foremost condition of this new normal. It's not necessarily your patient. Every patient is a customer of hundreds of providers in every aspect of life. Just take her healthcare life in both wellness and in sickness. Or just her technology life, in parentheses, phone, pod, pad, internet provider, software, hardware, home, office, car. Remember, this was 2011. Think of all the providers to whom she's exposed and with whom she deals. She can and will replace some of them in the blink of an eye and not bat the lash. But that's not all bad. Frankly, I've learned that concern for my business in a new normal can be a very strong motive as long as it yields to ambition and ultimately to purpose. So to find ourselves smack dab in the middle of an all-out war for the customer doesn't bother me a bit. In fact, I love it. Gives our clients an unusual opportunity to look more deeply into themselves and decide who and what they really want to be for their patients, and to develop better, more deliberate strategies to literally teach that to them. Here ends the reading. So here we are again in the middle of what I wrote in 2011 about as the new normal. Here we are apparently about to have another new normal, and it's okay. As long as you're taking the initiatives that make it impossible for your glass not to be full, a new normal is simply how we evolve and get better. It is not something to fear. I'm tired of that message. Well, those things being said, what an honor to be with you tonight. What an honor to have this invitation. I was so disappointed to not be together for a day with the Williams Group. I've been looking forward to it for, gosh, a year, I think, Cheryl, when we first started planning that. Cheryl's very on top of such things, as you probably know. And then suddenly, our opportunity to be together was gone. But I thank you for this, for our opportunity to be together nonetheless. I know there are a lot of old friends, people I've known for decades out there that are joining us. Perhaps you're gluttons for punishment, but I appreciate it. You're good mates, and I thank you. And my heartfelt thanks to Cheryl, Nish, Kim, and Sheldon, and all the incredible folks at the OAO for their relentless, I kid you not, relentless commitment to the success of their members despite the challenges. Whatever the challenge, thank you all for caring about us and being there for us and being good. I saw the contents of last night's town hall. Wow. Thanks not only for being there for us, but being good at being there for us. And I'd like to thank everyone who's joined in, everyone who's online tonight when there's a million things you could be doing, for caring enough to lead your patients, your team, your community, your nation, and your world into the reawakening that is incumbent and that has started, and about which I'm excited and enthused. Some of you received a video called Spirit Talk. We sent that to tens of thousands of colleagues around the world. By the way, email me if you'd like a link to it. If I didn't get that to you, my apologies. But it was a message that was the unheard message. And we zeroed in on 4 certainties during an uncertainty. And this isn't really the content of tonight's discussion, but I think it stages it well. Number 1, your purpose has not changed. There is nothing about this reawakening that is unfamiliar for us. Sometimes I chuckle when people say we need to reopen. Hey, this is the first time I've been in my office at the Williams Group since middle March. But there wasn't a thing I didn't know how to do when I got here. Now, granted, I'm not seeing patients. I'm just getting ready to do a webinar. But the driver has never been the details. It's always been the purpose. That purpose was noble before the virus, and that purpose is equally noble after the virus. So let's be successful because of our purpose, not because of the conditions around us. Number 2, who you are and what you decide to achieve hasn't changed because of a virus. Please know that the object, the root word of the word objective, belongs to you. It is your most personal asset. Whatever your object, whatever is a measuring stick for your motive, keep that object in sight, because it is absolutely, this is not a time to be thinking about to where we lower our objectives. I will not sign on with that because I know we control the outcomes. Yeah, things slowed down a little. Yeah, we totally had to cancel production for a while. How can that not impact production? Well, of course it does. but it doesn't have to change your objective. It is what it is. I hear people say that all the time. It is what it is. I'm writing a book called The 50 Dumbest Things Ever Mumbled, and that's one of them. It is what it is. No, it is what you decide it is. And I believe that with all my heart because I've seen it in 10,000 practices on 6 continents. Whoever you were before this thing, be that person after this thing. In case you can't tell, that one's big for me. Number 3, the paradigms of any new normal are not real. You know, I coached a lot of baseball. In fact, one of the great joys for me was coaching a national championship team, a 14-year-old team on which was my son Dane. I coached those boys for a long time, and when they were 14, it came together like nothing I've ever seen in my life. But I'll never forget when they were 11, and they moved in to play in the big parks. And so the fence that several of my guys would regularly hit over was now much further, and now they're playing in high school parks, and you know, they might be looking at 375, 400 feet out there in center field, and I could just see it in their faces. I can't hit out anymore. That fence is too far away. Until what? Until one of them hit out. And then what happened? As soon as one of my home run hitters hit out, all of my home run hitters started hitting out because they realized that that fence, that boundary, was imposed. It wasn't real. It felt real, but it wasn't. That's what I want us to understand in whatever this new normal is, the paradigms, the self-fulfilling prophecies that are being created for you on your behalf by other people that are supposedly experts are not real. When it comes to the outcomes of your business, their paradigms are not real. And finally, number 4, and very encouraging to me, the table is still set. You've seen the survey. It's a fascinating survey where people are asked, what is the greatest concern in your health? What do you fear most? And the answer is, I guess, both surprising and not surprising. The answer is, number one answer is going blind. I want to think about that for a moment because we are just as much in the wellness business as we are in the sickness business, unlike most people in healthcare. We get to see our patients and give them our absolute best, our undivided attention, and every bit of mission that we have, every bit of purpose we can muster, without them having to be sick or dying to get that attention from us. They get our best in times of their best, and that doesn't happen anywhere else in healthcare. And their number one concern during those times of wellness, their number one health fear is going blind. So if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. What does that tell you? It tells you that they hire you in times of perfectly healthy eyes and in times of sick eyes to look after their number one concern, and they put the faith in you to lead them to do it. Does the virus change that permanently? I believe it absolutely does not. Another quick read, and then we're going to start getting to it here. This is a paragraph from the book notes that I jotted down of late. In fact, I jotted this down shortly after coming back from Australia. when I saw that we're going to have to set a lead for our patients to follow. And by the way, I can tell you I'm seeing that. Our clients are reawakening and the patients are following their lead in incredibly encouraging ways. Here we go. This can change how you spend your time or what's on your mind, what initiatives you take. That's all good. But don't let this thing change who you are. Let it make you a better version of who you are, but don't let it change the core of you. The core of you is the key to leading your team and your patients out of this thing. You're a great eye doctor and a successful practitioner, an eye care team. Your patients trust you and have chosen you among countless alternatives to look after what they value most. They choose to patronize you because of who you are, not because of what you sell there. Whatever new normal comes of this, it will not be that the things that made you their choice or their tendency to follow your lead disappear. They will go back to being who they are as long as you stay true to who you are. We need to sail by that compass right now. It's too dark to sail without it. Show your true colors and sail your practice out of this. So, just a little spirit talk as we get set to grow the practice in the reawakening despite the new normal. What is the new normal? That has yet to reveal itself. But whatever it is, there is a set of initiatives that will keep your glass full in it. Sleep well tonight. Have peace in your mind and heart knowing that. There is a set of initiatives that will bring the objectives that are close to our hearts in any new normal. I'd like to look at this slide here, A Tale of Two Practices. It's always fascinated me that two practices can be a block apart. I've seen this in a number of places in Ontario, as a matter of fact, and be experiencing at any given point in time, whatever the normal of that time is, be experiencing amazingly different results. Perception of value would be an example. I might be observing in a practice and hear a patient say to a staff person or to the doctor, you know, I love coming here. Who controls that? By the way, when somebody says, I love coming here, what they're expressing is their perception of value. Value is the extent to which people perceive what you do as good, and their perception is high. Active rate. Active rate is one of my favorite metrics. I created active rate as a metric many years ago because it told me so much. It was keeping 5 metrics for the time of 1. What is active rate? It's the average length of time between scheduled exams across a sample of patients. So let's say the patients we see or we saw in February. What was the average length of time for those patients since their last exam? And I guarantee you, if you start watching active rate, it'll be months longer than you thought it was. And it'll change the way everybody thinks about things like, is our recall system good enough? Are we teaching patients what we need to teach them about valuing the future of vision? Or do we need to say triple our recall success rate? When we start watching active rate, it tells us, sort of like eye pressure, tells us if we need to start watching for glaucoma. And it's funny, when we start watching for it and give it attention and put initiatives toward it, we impact it. That's why the stock market never goes down 5 years later. Oh, it's up and down. Might not be the greatest time to use that example, but it's never been lower than it was 5 years later. Why? Because it has a bias to go up. Why? Because people are constantly watching their share price and taking initiatives to impact it. And if you keep the initiatives that work well and you ditch the ones that don't, it's going to go up. recall success rate. And by the way, my point with active rate is 2 practices can be a block apart and have 7-8 months different in their active rate, which tells you it has nothing to do with the competition or the economy or some condition of a given community or a profession. Recall success rate. One practice will be averaging 30% success rate on first contact, another averaging 90. Who controls that? Revenue per patient. I see practices with 3, 4, 5 doctors in them, and there's a $200 difference in the average patient transaction between 2 of the optometrists. With inside the same 4 walls, which shows you the point I'm making is, the table I'm setting is, we control that, but that's a decision, not a set of circumstances. No-shows, that averages 10%. Why do I see so many clients average 1%? New patients. We have a client in New Mexico celebrating their 30th year in practice, and they have 25% new patients. What business that's 20, 30 years old still has 1 in every 4 customers coming through the door for the first time? That's incredible. Who controls that? Why is a practice a block away or a half a mile away struggling? Inventory turnover. One practice turns their inventory 1.5 a year. Another practice turns it 3.5 times a year. Who controls that? Capture rate. In fact, some of you maybe attended my lecture tour called Capture This in Canada when we started seeing the capture rate just plummeting. Who controls that? I'd like to key up polling question number 1, Kim, if we could. And I'd like to ask you all a question and see what we find out here. The question is, what is your capture rate? And let me define that for you. Capture rate is the percentage of prescriptions that we write that we actually fill in-house. And so you have some choices there. It's 75% plus, 60 to 75%, etc. Let's find out. The feature for showing the polling outcome is a little bit new and untested for me, but I think we're going to have our results here. All right. I am going to enlarge this a little bit. I am just not quite able to make this out. So Cheryl, are you able to see the results there? And if so, feel free to read them out loud.
Yes, Tom, we have the majority, well, the biggest percentage is 33% for 35 to 50%, and the next one is 30% of the polling people said 50 to 60% capture rate.
And the 50 to 60% was what percent?
30%. 30%.
And what was the less than 35% rate?
Less than 35 was 12%.
And how about the 60 to 75?
17%.
Okay, look at the variance. Thank you, Cheryl, for bailing me out on that. The monitor I'm using just doesn't show that. So isn't that interesting? Look at the difference inside of an association that we all share in common, the Ontario Association of Optometrists. Look at the difference. And my question is, who controls these things? Perception of value, active rate, recall success, revenue per patient, no-shows, new patients, inventory turnover, capture rate. Are you getting the picture? The picture that I'm trying to paint is that we control this. I wrote about a new normal in 2011 because the recession was coming to an end. And at the backside of that recession, we were seeing some things happening that made the new normal clear. One of which is, if you don't prove your value every time you're patronized, you're going to lose your customer. Because it's too easy to go elsewhere. That was one of the conditions of the new normal in 2010, 2011. But my point is, we can choose to control the outcomes. All right. One last little stretch here as we kind of stretch out to look at some initiatives to impact these things. I'd like to just stop for a moment and make a realization, and that is that we provide the most proactive patient care, for which I could make a case that is the best patient care in the world. Again, in times of perfect wellness, your patient can have your undivided attention without something terrible happening, and it is that opportunity that will restore full productivity in the practice. Some of you know that 3 Christmases ago, my wife Kim had not 1 but 2 brain bleeds from an aneurysm and survived in a 2% survival category. And the amazing brain surgeon, who was part of what became known by tens of thousands of people around the world, people we didn't even know that were involved in this journey with us, from the blog that I did called The Miracle on 42nd Street, which is where the University of Nebraska Medical Center is in Omaha on 42nd Street at Christmas time. And when I met with Dan Serdell, who was certainly, quite likely, the most brilliant individual I've ever encountered, and he explained to me the 3 ways that we could go about this aneurysm in terms of treatment. And he described, the sort of traditional open brain surgery versus an intervascular where they go up through the vessel and I call it patch a tire from the inside. And using a device that's less than 1 millimeter. Well, we don't have time to go into the details, but I'll simply ask him the same question you would have asked him. And part of the miracle on 42nd Street was he was one of the few surgeons in the country that could provide any of the options. I mean, this guy's one of the most capable brain surgeons in the world, and I kept thinking, what's this guy doing in Omaha? Why isn't he somewhere amazing? And so I said to him the same thing you'd have said. I said, Dan, if this were your wife, what would you do? Maybe right now in your mind you're hearing your patient ask you a question. What do you recommend? That's the question I was asking him. And he looked at me straight in the face. And he said, Tom, if this were my wife, unequivocally, 100 times out of 100, I would do this option. It's the highest possibility of stroke. And by the way, she had 6 strokes after her surgery. It's the highest possibility of stroke, but it's the best possibility of a normal life. The decision was made in an instant, and she did have strokes, and for a while didn't even know who she was or where she lived or if she had children. But she came out of all that, and she's teaching kindergarten, and she got all these amazing students coming over and doing distance things during the time school was out this year because they loved her so much and she loved them. And she went back to being super kindergarten teacher of 30 some years. Here's my point. You get to give your patient that kind of focus and attention without an aneurysm. You get to give your patient your very best judgment and lead them without anything terrible having to happen. And when you lead them, and you lead them based on purpose, then marketing rule number 6 comes into play. And we have a record year. How do we beat the impacts of the coronavirus? Start doing the things that make for a record year. That's it. That's the answer. All right, so these things being said, that full glass is a marketing thing. Let's define marketing. What is marketing? Well, I went to marketing school, and I'm going to reduce 4 years of it into a few seconds. Marketing is anything you do to cause and sustain value. One of the very important words there is anything, but the most important word is value. And that begs a second definition, doesn't it? Which is, okay, what is value? Well, I'm going to give you the definition that I've been saving for the book, but you get it here tonight, which is this. Value is the extent to which people perceive what you do as good. I'm going to just say it again. Value is the extent to which people perceive what you do as good. Every consumptive decision of the formal new normal, and I'm sure of whatever is the new normal, is based on value. And so, the extent to which people perceive what you do as good, the operating word is perceive. Is value real? If we were all together in the room as we were supposed to be in Toronto, I'd have you answer out loud. And I'd find that some of you kind of scratch your head and say yes, and some of you kind of scratch your head and say no. Is value real? Well, let's look at it this way. Have you ever had a patient complain about a fee? Okay, you know that you're the most ridiculous bargain in all of healthcare. The fact that I can get the undivided attention of you and your team without anything terrible, without being sick or dying, is simply unbelievable to me in healthcare. It blows my mind that I can actually have that with nothing awful happening. It's the most absurd bargain in all of healthcare. But if somebody complains about a fee, what they're saying is my perception of value based on what you're at, and value is composed of what we call the triplicate of choice. If you draw a triangle, it's 3 things. In the corners, value is these 3 things: price, service, quality. What we learn in marketing school is you have to be the best at one of those and you can prevail. What I've learned since is that is incorrect. You have to be the best at 2. Any 2 will work, but if you try to be the best at all 3, price, service, or maybe we think of service as relationship, price, relationship, and quality, if you try to be the best at all 3, you're out of business unless you're being subsidized. So when I say to our clients, which 2 do you pick? Any 2 will work. It's usually service or relationship and quality. Okay, well, we have to be able to charge at a level that enables that. But it's still the most absurd bargain in all of healthcare. But my perception, if I'm complaining about the fee, my perception of value is low. So you're seeing right there that you and I may have a different perception of value, which tells you that value isn't real. Or maybe a better way to say it, value isn't literal. I remember my friend Kent and I going on and on and on in our men's group at church years ago. He was a rocket scientist for NASA. You know, the old expression, doesn't take a rocket scientist. He actually was one, and he's retired, teaching physics at Southeast Community College here in Lincoln, Nebraska. In fact, he taught my daughter in physics. She was short some credit hours when she changed her major to physical therapy, and thank goodness Kent took her in, and she was able to take a couple of physics courses there that transferred to the university. But we were arguing, is perception reality? As a marketing person, my answer is yes, but as a scientist, his answer was no. No, the perception was the space shuttle was ready to go. The reality was that it blew up and all the nice people died those many years ago. What he said was, no, reality is reality. And then I'd explain things like somebody complaining about a fee for something that it's an absurd bargain, and we'd understand that no, perception is reality, and so we finally agreed to disagree. But the point is this. Have you ever had a patient complain about a fee, but then you taught them something? You explain something you know, or a staff person explains something you know that the patient didn't know, and before the conversation was over, you won the nodding head. You won their favor. You won them over. I'll bet every single one of us can think of multiple times that we've either seen or been part of the conversation where that happened. They complain about a fee, we taught them something we knew, and we won them over. And the multi-million-dollar question is, whatever you taught them to win them over, why did you not teach them that before they knew the fee? Why don't we make a decision to be valuable? There are certain things that you know that when your patients know those things, they behave. I studied what's called consumer behavior. And when patients know what you know, most of them, if they're the right fit for your practice, behave the way you want them to. For example, capture rate. What's behaving? Stay in house. Okay, well, what things do we need to teach them? You and I know that when we take a prescription into a pharmacy to get a pill, that pill is the same no matter what pharmacy we get it. No matter from what place we purchase that pill with that prescription, what comes out of the bottle is exactly the same. That is not true with the things that we prescribe. The experience they have in life is not the same from one place to another just by filling a prescription, but they don't know that. And so, value is the extent to which people perceive what you do as good, and the multi-million-dollar question is, whatever the things that are valuable that you know, that when they know they behave, why don't we create a program to make sure we teach them that every single time they're in? It's sort of like drive carefully or I love you. You don't just say that to somebody. Those of you that have children that drive, what do you say to them every time they get in the car? Drive carefully. And yeah, they roll their eyes, but someday they'll get it. And maybe they actually do listen a little bit and pay attention and buckle their seatbelt and such. Do you say I love you to the people you love one time and figure, well, that'll be good forever? Don't ever need to tell them again. When I told her I loved her, that I should be good. No, it doesn't work like that. There's certain things that are worthy of being said over and over and over again, and that is exactly what I'm talking about. For example, in the exam room. All right, remember, it's not the new normal, and this is what I wrote about in 2011, it's not a battle for value, it's a war, and it's a permanent one. And people will make their decisions, which will determine whether the glass is full or partially full based on value. The extent to which people perceive what you do is good. All right, a few fundamental rules. So there are just 6 fundamental rules in marketing. Marketing rule number 1, you have to know yourself to market yourself. So what I mean by that is you have to market the incomparable and the untouchable. You have to decide, what is it about my practice? What is it about what we do here, our team here in this practice, in our service, in our mission, in our purpose with our patients? And you know, do we have great equipment? Of course we do. Do we have nice frames and products? Of course we do. Are we friendly? Of course we are. Do we have parking? Of course we do. Do we have state-of-the-art capabilities? Of course we do. There's nothing unique about that. Nobody markets that they're not friendly, for example. I've always chuckled at these places called gentle dentistry. I've always wondered, I wonder if anybody would come to a practice that was called rough and painful dentistry. Right? I doubt it. But the thing is, isn't everybody gentle? I mean, what's unique about that? You need to market the incomparable, which is not the things you do. It's the relationship they come in. I always build marketing initiatives around teaching people to value the relationship. That's the key. What is it that's uncomparable and untouchable? It's the relationship you have with your patient. Marketing rule number 2, if you want somebody to know something, tell them. Ever have a patient leave you? Go somewhere else? Did one of those ever come back? You know, it's a big deal for them to come back. It's embarrassing. It's awkward. They know that you know that they left. They came back anyway. Why? Because they found out how valuable you were. When they had something to make it relative. When they had relativity, they then understood your value and they faced the music. They walked the walk of shame and came back. Which is why we constantly need to be doing reactivation efforts to make that olive branch just out there for them. But do you ever ask yourself, what is it that they learned about me by going to someone else? And did they really have to leave me to learn that? And I'll bet you at least a majority of the time the answer is no. We could have taught them that, prevented them from leaving in the first place. Again, it's just like drive carefully. If there's something you want someone to know, tell them. Marketing rule number 3, if you want somebody to do something, ask. You want to increase your contact lens fits by 50%? You know, do a promotional month where we invite every good contact lens candidate to a contact lens trial. Watch what happens. Just got to ask. Marketing rule number 4, the less I have to lose, the more likely I am to do it. I just saw that. Sorry about that. All my slide hadn't advanced. So marketing rule number 1, know yourself to market yourself. Marketing rule number 2, if you want somebody to know something, tell them. Marketing rule number 3, if you want someone to do something, ask them. Marketing rule number 4, remove the barriers. The less I have to lose, the more likely I am to do it. My friend Joe is a personal injury attorney. You know, if you've been injured and you wonder if you have a case, who would you seek for counsel? The one that tells you it's $575 an hour, or the one that tells you it's nothing unless you win? And we maybe make fun of that application of marketing rule number 4, and perhaps it's worthy of that, but it still works. We don't have to pervert the marketing rules to leverage them in our practices. We just have to know them. Marketing rule number 5, brand everything. We have a client who changed the name of the examination to a complete vision assessment and 10-point eye health evaluation. And all of a sudden, patients started asking all kinds of questions. Why? Because they knew something they didn't know before. And that's what branding is. Branding is for teaching people who don't know what you know to know what you know just by your selection of words. Some of you are building your dry eye specialty practices. Have you named them? Have you named the Center for Dry Eye Treatment inside of the broader entity? Branding, programs. Everybody has a nice progressive lens and some nice treatments they can do to the lens to, cut back on glare and have the lens change color to adjust to the light. And yeah, but I can buy that online. What if I branded it? What if I called it the All Distances program with the light control? All Distances program with light control. Or again, what if instead of just contacts, I called it a guaranteed contact lens success program? That's what you do. That's what you provide. Why not name it? Marketing rule number 6, we've talked about it. What's good for the patient is good for the practice. I wrote marketing rule number 6 after I visited a practice in a little town called Storm Lake, Iowa, when I saw an elderly patient whose name was Lloyd. I was an optometry novice. I chose optometry because I saw how competitive it was becoming, and I thought, a lot of marketing people, well, why don't I go where everybody knows what I know? So they go to ad agencies and become think tanks. And my thought was, where could I go where nobody knows what I know and it could be valuable to help them learn it? And I chose optometry with my then partner, Dr. Brad Williams, who to this day in his retirement is one of my dearest friends. And I went along on a site visit just to take it all in. One of our first clients at the Williams Group, one of our first 5 clients. And I witnessed Lloyd learning that the change, that the reason he hadn't been in 5 years, and I can remember the doctor's concern, didn't you get our recall notice, which by the way was a picture of Garfield in a ballerina outfit that said it's been too long since your eye exam. And that's the thing. People are trying to be clever when what they should be is effective. They should have taught Lloyd to value the future of vision instead of vision. They should have based everything on the tests we're doing to test the future of vision. Because Lloyd figured, he was a farmer, and he figured, hey, when my glasses break, I'll come on in. Well, his vision had changed, and when he learned that he had suffered an irrecoverable loss of vision because he had a fairly advanced state of glaucoma, it was noticeably sad. And that's when I made a realization that marketing rule number 6 needs to come into existence, which is what's good for the patient is good for the practice. If we would pre-schedule Lloyd, the average traditional recalled patient is 30% success rate on first contact. The average pre-scheduled patient, when we follow up, 90% confirm on first contact. Which one's better for Lloyd? Which one would have ensured that we caught it early? Oh, and by the way, which one's best for the practice? Well, the latter happens to be the single most potent form of patient retention of all time. And when we started to talk about it 35 years ago, people looked at us like we were nuts. But it worked. So there's really all you need to know about the basics. And so Those are the things we need to know about marketing. Where do we need to apply them? Well, this next slide shows you what, in marketing school, you learn what's called the production cycle. And this is a typical optometry production cycle. Think of them as rungs on a ladder, and we start with the first rung. There's some kind of attraction where they know we exist. Maybe it's a referral. Maybe it's our sign on the door. Maybe it's our activity in the community, or who knows, but something attracts them. And then there's gatekeeping. That's physical, that's phone reception. Will we open the gate or will we slam it shut? Fortunately, we control most of that here in the United States, where people work so hard to try to find, private pay patients, and I know that we have some of that there too. What's the best? People ask, what's the best way to get private pay patients? It's your receptionist. It's converting phone shoppers. That's the single most effective way to get. They're all private pay. Mark, the third phase, physical reception. What do we teach? For example, when we hand them a form, do we teach them that the doctor's going to spend a few minutes with this before she begins the examination? And if you have any questions, so it's really important, if you have any questions, just grab me. When I was a patient at Mayo Clinic, I had to fill out 2 copies of the same form in the endocrinologist's visit. And then he started asking me the exact same questions that were on the form. And I literally asked him, did you read my form? I worked really hard on it. And I wasn't trying to be a smart aleck. What's the best way to get patients to take something like that seriously? Refer it to the doctor's use. It's very simple. Do we teach them that? Or do we just tell them to fill this out, or give them the pad and tell them to complete it? Or ask them the questions, but not refer this to ultimately the summary that is, that will be understood and discussed by the doctor. Data collection. I call data collection stage 1. I like to have the examination be called stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Why? Because it teaches people to value things. It's branding. It's marketing rule number 5. Pre-exam. Do they know that this particular diagnostic test is to find evidence of the silent thief of sight? That's just simply branding for glaucoma. Evaluation and diagnosis. Do we teach them in stage 6? We're going to talk about this one in a big way. Do we teach them that we're actually testing the future of their vision? That's the single most potent form of patient retention I've ever found, is to talk about the testing we're doing for future of vision. Treatment and prescribing, stage 3. What do we teach them? Do we make our judgment known? Your judgment's just as important as Dr. Serdell's. It's just that you're not doing brain surgery. But I still would imagine that as a patient, don't I deserve your judgment? So why do I have to solicit it and ask you what you recommend? Selection and dispensing. What unique selling propositions do we teach them about the relationship within which comes our product here? Dismissal. What's the last thing they're thinking? What's the last thing we teach them on dismissal? To pick up the circle where we left it off. It's not linear, it's circular. And of course, follow-up. So we look at these 6 marketing rules, and then we say, which are on your screen again here, and then we say, okay, where do we apply them? Do we apply them at the front desk? Do we apply them, back in the exam room? Do we apply them in the parking lot? Do we apply them in the dispensary, in the contact lens area, in the dry eye area, in our medical optometry practice? Where do we apply the rules? And there's your answer. We apply them at all 10 levels. And so what we want to do, the big mistake we make is we think patients know what we know in every one of these levels, and they don't. The most basic things, like, for example, ophthalmoscopy is not a vision test. Okay, Mrs. Jones, this next test is part of the 10-point eye health evaluation. Is not a vision test. This is a future of vision test. This is where we're going to look at the condition of a number of the structures in the eye that tell us where we're going here in the days ahead. I'm going to start with a nice, good look at the retina. I have a good view of your retina now, which is the one place where we can actually see the vascular tissue. Go ahead and blink. Okay, look straight ahead. Okay, looking now at the optic nerve, which is the brain's extension into the eye. I see a very healthy optic nerve. I'm very pleased with this. Are we teaching them to value? Are they teaching them to know what you know? Because if they know what you know, they'll behave. And so we want to stop making that mistake, and the way we do so is with what we call the UP objectives. UP stands for, UP stands for understanding and perception, UP. And I created the UP objectives many years ago so that we could understand that at each of these 10 levels, at each of those 10 levels on your screen, at each rung in your ladder of a patient's experience, what's called the cycle of production, we need to write an UP objective. What do we want the patient to understand, and how do we want them to perceive, or what do we want them to perceive before they go to the next rung? What if we didn't know our objectives for certain things, say acuity? What if you didn't know your objective for acuity? Or eye pressure? What if we just took a random eye pressure, but we didn't have it relative to anything? We didn't know what normal, we hadn't defined normal eye pressure. Well, then it's worthless. It's no good to have an objective without knowing the outcome, but it's no good to know the outcome without having an objective. And yet when I ask people, could I see a copy of the written objectives that as a team we know we are going to teach, we're not going to hope they figure it out. It's like I love you or drive carefully. We're going to do it every time, and we'll say it more in a day than they'll hear it in their lives. But this isn't about us. This is about them, the patients. And yet when I ask people, could I see a list of the objectives for everything that we've decided we're going to teach a patient at each rung in the ladder, people look at me again like I'm crazy. People look at me like that a lot, I guess. You're not surprised, I'm sure. But can you imagine not knowing your objectives? That's the question I want you to ask yourself and your team, when it's so easy to define them. And I'm going to script out some examples here in a bit. So what is a marketing plan? Well, this isn't what they taught us so there's the UP objectives. This isn't what they taught us in marketing school. But what a marketing plan is simply creating the objectives for what we want our patients to know and perceive, and then the strategies, the initiatives that we can implement to make sure they do. That's it. It's not doing a bunch of research and spending a bunch of money. Spending money on marketing, by the way, is totally overrated. It can have a place, and it can be in a reasonably important place, but most of what we need to do to achieve a glass that's overflowing from the pitcher costs nothing, not one dime. So a marketing plan is the written initiatives to accomplish the written objectives. We need the clearly written objectives, and we need the clearly written or known initiatives that, when implemented, make it literally impossible not to achieve the objectives. So those things being said, what if I told you there were 7 initiatives we could implement in the week ahead, no matter how much of our normal schedule we're able to see right now? What if I told you there were 7 things that we could implement that would allow us to increase or to accomplish these things? Okay. Number 1, improve our patient care. It's already the best patient care in the world, but make it even better. Already the best in the world, but make it even better. Number 2, dramatically increase the perception of value our patients have for the relationship they have with the practice. Remember, this is a war, not a battle for value. Number 3, we could dramatically, measurably increase patient retention, measurable by things like active rate, recall success rate on first contact, the metrics, the business's version of things like acuity and eye pressure that tell us our answer. Increase or improve our active rate. In other words, carve months off of the average length of time between exams across the patient base. Retention, active rate, perception of value. It's about keeping the water in. Eliminate no-shows. Increase revenue per patient. Now we're adding some water to the glass. Increase capture rate. Adding water to the glass. Increase new patients. Adding water to the glass. What if we could accomplish all those things by implementing 7 initiatives that would not take any more time than a patient visit does now, and not compromise one shred of your professional integrity and cost you 0? If there were 7 initiatives we could implement that would cause those things to happen: improve patient care, better perception of value, better patient retention, better active rate, eliminate no-shows, increase revenue per patient, increase capture rate, and increase new patients, all while not taking any more time, not compromising our professional integrity, and costing nothing. This is the part where I'd ask you, if you were live, if you could accomplish all of those things by doing these 7 things, would you do them? Raise your hand. So I'm just going to ask you to do that. Maybe you're all by yourself and it feels silly. But if there were 7 things that you could do that would accomplish that list, raise your hand if you'd do them. My hand is up. All right. Let's look at number 1. Patient care instead of sales. We've got to take, what is it that keeps an optometrist from doing her job more than any other thing? What's her job? We'll get to that. Think about it a little bit. If you're my eye doctor, for what do I hire you? My question isn't, why do I hire my eye doctor? My question is, why do I hire you as my eye doctor? Why did I hire Dan Serdell as the brain surgeon? Hopefully there's an answer forming in your mind. But what prevents more optometrists from doing their job than any other single thing is the fact that nothing terrible is happening. And therefore, what is clearly a patient care thing, clearly a life-impacting thing, might feel like I'm trying to sell something. When Dan talked to me about the 3 different options for brain surgery and then said if it were my wife, 100 times, this is exactly how he said it, 100 times out of 100, I do this one. That wasn't selling. That was patient care. So, this is where I'd ask you to raise your hand if you'd like to increase your sales, your revenue in the practice. Some of you would raise your hand, and then I'd say raise your hand if you consider yourself a salesperson, if sales is your thing. And then I see far fewer hands, and then I say raise your hand if you'd like to increase sales without selling anything, and everybody raises up their hand. And I ask them, what's the difference from the patient's perspective between feeling like I'm experiencing patient care and feeling like I'm experiencing a sales pitch? Well, let me give you an example. When Dane was young, our son Dane, he had a terrible pain in his side. And when we took him to the pediatrician, who's a good friend of mine, Brad, and by the way, one of the things I convinced Brad to do was start pre-scheduling well-child visits. We branded it well-child visits because we were always in during flu season, and everybody was sick, and you couldn't, nobody, they were overbooked, and there was no time. And I wanted to ask things and have him talk to my kids about what they eat and hear some of that stuff from somebody other than I, because they had a lot of respect for Brad. And it takes a community. But there was never any time. They were always rushing. No time, no time, no time. Busy practice. One of the few pediatric clinics in the country that has 5 locations in the same town. Well, it was starting to pre-schedule well-child visits, which I convinced him to do in exchange for a few house calls that caused they had to build 3 more locations and same sickness services. But pre-scheduling your 4-year-old well-child visit when your 3-year-old well-child visit ended today. And having the doctor involved in that changed the whole game. Was a total game breaker. Well, what if we were, when he came in for his stomach ache and Brad said, gee, Tom, I know you were going to lecture tonight for your friends in Ontario, but man, we got to have a change in plan. You better call Cheryl and Kim and let them know that you're going to be busy because we need to do an emergency surgery on Dane. His appendix are going to rupture, which is life-threatening. And so before that happens, we need to do an appendectomy. We don't need to get all freaked out. We just need to remove Dane's appendix this afternoon. Okay. Now, does that feel like sales? That is the thought bubble that you have, I think Dr. Brad's trying to sell me something. Because that's not my thought bubble at all. But what if I were in for Dane's 5-year-old, 6-year-old well-child exam, and Dr. Brad said, oh, Dane's doing great, we did this, and he's doing, he has some asthma, we listened to his lungs, and doing great here, and we're going to change the inhaler, and okay, all good. Oh, by the way, while you're here, why don't we remove Dane's appendix? See, that doesn't work, does it? Which is sort of like, hey, your vision hasn't changed at all, but how about you buy some glasses anyway? So the difference between selling and patient care is who brought it up. You got to wait till I tell you Dane has a stomach ache, then you tell me appendectomy. You don't tell me appendectomy till I tell you he has stomach ache. That's how it works. But because nothing is necessarily wrong or nobody's sick or dying when the patient came in, the things that are equally important as a long-term impact on quality of life feel like sales, right? And so what do? We sit down, we get together, and we say, what would we like in our practice to have the freedom to discuss with patients without ever feeling weird? Just to turn ourselves loose on full pursuit of the mission and not feel like we're trying to push something on someone. Well, you form a question. You take those services or products for which you want to have those comfort levels when you present them, and you form a question. Let me read you just a few that I've jotted down. Are there times you'd rather not wear glasses? Okay, I circle that one, yes. Okay, Tom, one of the things I mentioned, I saw in your diagnostic, this is a doctor talking, diagnostic form is, there are times you'd rather not wear glasses. And you know, I apologize if I've missed that in the past, because it's interesting to me that we've never had a conversation about contact lenses, ... But you needed to hear from me first. Yes, there are times. Are you interested in learning about the latest technology for best contact lens vision and comfort? Do you have more than one pair of current prescription eyeglasses? Okay, so my question on all of these is, when you have the answer, what do you recommend? How many hours a week are you outdoors in an average week? What do you recommend, doctor? Are you bothered by glare and reflection, such as in night driving? That's when it gets me. I can just tell you, when it's, kind of wet, under street lights, concrete, that's when glare really bothers me off the windshield, nighttime, strangely enough. But did you know there are 15, this is a U.S. stat, but there are 15,000 vehicle crashes a day in the United States that involve death or serious injury? 15,000 a day, and 1/3 of them are a result of vision impairment by people that see perfectly. Oh yeah? So what do you recommend? Are there activities that regularly put your eyes in danger, i.e. mowing the lawn? Every foreign body we ever removed should have been avoided if we just did our jobs. If you wear glasses, would you benefit by lenses that were thinner, lighter, and more comfortable? Oh yeah? What do you recommend? Are you interested in learning about the latest technology for perfecting vision at all distances? Who answers that question that's over 50? Who answers that question no? Because I don't. I'm circling that one 5 times. Yes, I am interested in learning about the latest technology for that. What I'm saying there, doctor, is, what do you recommend? Tom, one of the things you mentioned is you have some interest in, hey, what can we do to just really improve vision at different distances? The way we're experiencing life now at 55, and I've got a couple of things I'm going to really strongly recommend here, ... Do your job. If that feels like sales to you, then we're driven by an ambition motive and not a purpose motive. We just need to get, and that's not a criticism, I'm just saying we just need to get more aligned with purpose. How many hours a week are your eyes exposed to potentially harmful blue light? Parenthesis, computer, phone, pad, etc. Oh yeah? What do you recommend? Are there situations where perfect vision is particularly important to you? Oh yeah? What do you recommend? I can tell you when it is for me. When the sun's going down and the fish are finally feeding on top, and I'm throwing a number 20 dry fly on the Bighorn River with that little bit of glare still coming off where the sun set, but every fish in the river is on top right now and I want to catch them, and I only have a little bit of time to do it. That's when perfect vision is more important to me than any other time. I know the answer to the question, so does every one of your patients. Just share a quick thing here. I was interviewed by a group called Sales Gym for a new book that they're writing. It's a kind of a cool book, and so I just want to read you the quote they sent me from our interview that I had to approve. I believe purpose-driven people understand sales simply as helping people that don't know what you know what you know, so that they can learn to value that, but relative to their lives. When they learn to value something you know in the right light for what they seek, which the sales process can and should accomplish, they can then accept a solution you're offering because it is a fit with how they value and what they are striving to achieve in their lives, not because it's something you determined you wanted them to have. I call this managing perception of value, and in my experience, it is that we should endeavor in sales, not that somebody buys something. When someone to whom you're offering your service or product and the relationship within which it comes learns to value that product in a light that brings better life outcome for that person, what you achieve by design, there's acceptance and ultimately a sale. So there's marketing rule number 6. Dr. Serdell never came across like he was selling me anything because he believed in his treatment recommendation. Why does somebody have to be sick or dying in order for it to feel like that? Why can't we be in the wellness business and feel equally passionate about our judgment? All right, so make it patient care and not selling. Number 2, set the tone for better value. I have a polling question for you. I'd like to queue up polling question number 2, Kim. And I like this question because it's more than just about a no-show. So what is the number 1 reason for a no-show? Is it A, I forgot, B, something else came up, or C, I just decided not to come? By the way, I know the answer, but I'd love to hear your guess. Sharing poll results. Okay, looks like forgot, 45%. Something came up, 32%. Decided not to come. I think it says 20-something%. Am I close, Cheryl? I can't quite see it on my monitor.
Yeah, 23% is the last one.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Well, thank you for playing. It's actually C. I chose not to come. That's the number 1 reason for a no-show. I knew full well that my exam was now, and I could have made it, but I chose not to come. The number 1 lie is I forgot. Well, why would they choose not to come? Because something else beat you in a contest of value for my time, my money, or both. That's why. That's it. So why would they choose not to come? Because they self-diagnosed. That's on you, Doc. No amount of marketing in the world can fix that the way you can. And so you may recall speech class. Okay? You now know marketing rule number 2. If you want someone to know something, tell them. Okay? So if you teach me to know what you know, I'll behave. In speech class, we know that we're supposed to do 3 things when we give our speech. We're supposed to tell the audience what we're going to tell them. Then we're supposed to tell them. Then we're supposed to tell them what we told them. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them. Then tell them what you told them. Well, this is the telling them what you're going to tell them part. I call this the special welcome. And I always make 4 points. If you have a pen handy, jot these 4 things down. Welcome. Vision and future revision. I will teach you. And ask me. Now, I'm going to role play those 4 things. And this is one of a couple, we're going to look at the other one next, ways to dramatically reduce the amount of water that leaks out of your glass so we can put dramatically less pressure on what's coming in. Okay, welcome, vision, future, I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, but I know my 4 points. Welcome, vision, future of vision. I will teach you, ask me. By the way, there have been studies that show the most powerful word in language is the word welcome. Not greetings or howdy or the actual word welcome. Why would we not leverage that? So let's say that I have a new patient in my chair and we're talking, you know, where are you from? How you been? You know, it's great to see you. We sure appreciate you making the trip despite, you know, some of the scary things that have been happening in the world, but we're back at it and we're awfully glad that you're here. And listen, whenever we're together, I want you to know that, oh, wait a minute, I need to back up. So after we have our little chat, you know, greet your patient the way you always do. I'm not trying to coach you on that. That would be offensive to you. But when we've accomplished that, implement the strategy to achieve the objective, which is teaching the patient to value the future of vision. Well, great, Tom, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And as we do, hey, I just want to take a moment on behalf of the whole team and tell you welcome to the practice. We get really excited about our new patients. It's great to have you as a new patient. And I want you to know that whenever we're together, we're going to be concerned about a couple of things. And we're going to be doing testing to understand a couple of things. One is vision. And our goal is perfect vision, out in the distance, up close, points in between. We're very passionate about that here. And so we're going to be using the process of elimination to understand, hey, what do we need for Tom to have perfect vision? But more importantly, we're always going to take time to test the future of your vision. And we're going to do that because our goal is perfect vision for life. And to evaluate future of vision, where is vision headed? We do that by examining the structures within the eye that show where we're headed. And as as we do so, as we go through life, we know these conditions, these structures, we know the conditions will change. What we don't know is, are we seeing those changes as we expected? And when not, we're on top of it for treatment now. So as we're doing that, I'm just going to take a little extra time and talk with you about what I'm doing, what I'm looking at, what I'm seeing, sharing some things I'm documenting for comparison a year from now. And this is interesting stuff. So as we go along, if you have some questions while we're doing that, just stop me and ask. Have you ever had a doctor talk to you like that before? I've only had one. His name's Jim, and he's my eye doctor. He and I worked on this concept 30 years ago together. What are you saying, Tom? I'm saying that patients don't understand that we're testing the future of vision. And if there's some way that I said that or positioned it where you say, I'm not quite comfortable with, you say it in a way you're comfortable. Maybe it's a returning patient that's already heard I love you or drive carefully before. So, hey, Tom, how you been? Hey, I heard you guys went fishing. How was the trip? Great. You know, how's Meredith doing in physical therapy school? Oh, wow, she's in her 3rd year. Man, that's exciting. Has she got her rotations coming up? Enjoy life. Enjoy the fact that your patient doesn't have to be sick or dying to be there with you. But when we've accomplished in your way what we've accomplished by that interaction, get down to the teaching at hand. Well, listen, Tom, we're going to go ahead and get started. And as we do, as always, just want to take a moment on behalf of the team and tell you welcome back. It's good to be together. And as you know, when we get together, we're concerned about and we're zeroing in on two things. One is vision. Let's find out what's changed out in the distance, up close. I know when we were together last, we were needing to work on the close game, the putting game a little bit. Let's see what's going on there. Let's see what we need to do to get back to that perfect vision. You know, that's very important to us. But more importantly, as you know, this is when we make some comparisons. This is when we test the future of vision. And we do close examination of those structures inside the eye, and we learn, are things changing? And are they changes the way that we expect them to be? And when they're not, we're on top of it. So as always, as we think about future of vision, I'm just going to be talking about, again, what we're seeing, what we're documenting, what we're finding relative to when we did this last. And as always, when you have questions, stop me and ask. You know, we feel like this is important stuff. You don't just say, I love you once. We combine that with this next little piece, and we really shouldn't have any problem with filling the holes in the glass, and that's diagnostic feedback. So remember, in the speech class, you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them what you told them. This is the telling them. So we told them what we were going to tell them in the special welcome or special welcome back. Now we're telling them. So thinking again, what's the number one reason for a no-show? It's that they decided not to come. Why did they decide not to come? Because they self-diagnosed. Why did they self-diagnose? Because they could see fine, and we didn't teach them that this isn't about vision. This is about future of vision. We already know that they list fear of losing their sight is their number one healthcare concern. Why would they choose not to come? Because they self-diagnosed. Marketing rule number 2, if you want someone to know something, tell them. Let's cue up polling question number 3, if we could, Kim. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So when patients are experiencing diagnostic testing, what do they most want to know? Okay, what is this test you're doing? Why? You know, what are you looking for? You know, did I pass? And when do we do it again? What do they most want to know? Okay, what are you doing? Looks like 4%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl. What are you looking for? Looks like 57. Right? What outcome was found? Is that 37? And when do we want to do it next? 2%. So the number one answer here was, what are you looking for? Very, very interesting. The top two, which are really difficult to distinguish between, are B and C. What are you looking for? And did I pass? Maybe you even have patients ask you, hey, did I pass? I hear that a lot. I used to observe in a lot of exam rooms, and it would always be hard for me not to chuckle out loud when somebody would say, did I pass? But here's what I've learned. None of these are anywhere near as good without the other three. What I've learned is that when we provide diagnostic feedback, there need to be 4 distinct parts. And there's a chronology that's a game breaker. Remember, we're trying to fill the holes in your glass, so if we add a little more water, the glass overflows. So the chronology is in the order that you see them there, or that you saw them in the polling question. What are you doing? What are you looking for? What are you seeing? And it's most valuable if I can tell them what they're seeing while I'm looking instead of later on. And that's, of course, provided it's good. You know, and I'll role play it a little bit. But if what we're seeing is good, let's feedback out loud. You know, have the breath mint and feedback out loud. And then when I want to do it again, we know from marketing school, the key number and frequency is 4. We want the patient to hear when we want to do this again with each part of the vision evaluation or 10-point eye health evaluation or whatever. If they hear 4 times when we want to do it again, that's kind of a key number. That's going to put us at a different place in our recall efforts. So I'm just going to role play. I'm going to role play from exam stage 1. Okay, when we did our pre-testing. Tom, one of the things we did in what we call exam stage 1, in that first stage here, and for which I have the results, is a test for an eye condition, an eye disease called glaucoma. I think of glaucoma as this silent thief of sight. And we detect it, one way we detect it is with what we call eye pressure. It's sort of like blood pressure. Your eyes have a pressure and there's a normal range, and when we start to see that high or creeping up, we immediately start thinking about glaucoma and ways we can manage that condition with the future of vision in mind. And what I'm very pleased to tell you is that your eye pressure is X, which is right in the normal range that we want to see it. I'm going to make a few notes about that, and that's one of the things I want to make sure we compare again in a year. 4 parts. What are we doing? What are we looking for? What are we seeing when we want to do it again? Tom, this next stage in the eye health evaluation is, or this next test in the eye health evaluation, or the next part of the examination, however you want to say it, is called ophthalmoscopy, which has a lot of syllables. And basically what that means is I'm going to take a really close look at some of the structures into the eye. This is one of those future of vision parts of the examination. And I'm just going to have you look straight ahead here. Good. Start with a good close look at what's called your retina, which is the lining of the eye, in a place where we can, the one place where we can actually see the vascular tissue, and the retinal tissue looks great. I'm very happy with this. Looking now at the optic nerve and nerve head. Just something we watch very carefully over the years. I'm seeing a very healthy optic nerve, nothing here that concerns me. I'm very glad for that. Just when it's good, why the quiet? Why wait till the end when we say, oh, yep, did I pass? Yep, you did. And I'm not criticizing you, but what I am saying is I record an average of 2.5 minutes of silence during diagnostic testing in the exam room, and I believe that silence is not golden. It's not even bronze. It's not even on the podium for a medal. There's so much more we can do with active diagnostic feedback if we understand the importance of future vision. And then when we've done that feedback, remember what I'm doing, what I'm looking for, what I'm seeing while I'm seeing it, as long as it's good, of course. If you're seeing something terrible, that's not a marketing conversation at all. You just do that exactly the way you always have. And that doesn't involve that's not a practice growth lecture. Okay? But when they're passing with flying colors, this is what tends to make them self-diagnose. And we want to teach them to value the future of vision. And then when we finished, say, that particular step, ophthalmoscopy, listen, Tom, we've completed, again, what we call ophthalmoscopy, passed with flying colors. Here's what we know. What we know, there's going to be changes in the conditions of these structures. I'm documenting a few things that for very careful comparison a year from now, and when we're together again, I promise that we're going to find out what's changed there. And if there's something concerning us, we're going to know it. Why not triple your recall success rate? It's not about how many times did you leave a message, or did you send a text, or did you send an email, or did you do a phone call. They all work. They got your message. They got your voicemail. They chose not to come or chose not to reply. Why? Not because they've left you. I mean, maybe they did, but more likely they just don't see the value. All right. Let's talk about the holy grail of marketing. Clearer recommendations. I asked you earlier, why does your patient hire you? Well, this answer is a 20, 25, maybe 30% increase in revenue per patient if you believe. Because it's simply your judgment. Why do I hire you as my eye doctor? It's not for your equipment or your convenient location or the nice things you sell here or the services you provide. It's for your judgment. And so many times I hear people have to solicit the judgment. What do you recommend? I'll ask the staff, have you ever found that you can recommend something over and over again, have long conversations with the patient, and then the doctor recommends the exact same thing, happens to mention the exact same thing you mentioned, and the patient says, oh, okay. Yeah, your staff says, yeah, I can relate. There's something about the doctor's judgment that's real. It's patient care. Now, the good news is nobody has to be sick or dying. But I believe that to withhold our judgment is arguably not doing our jobs. And I would never seek to criticize you. You provide the greatest patient care, the most proactive patient relationship in the world. And I'm in awe of it. But this is an area where if you could watch a couple of days in the exam rooms on video, you'd be shocked at how seldom you hear the kind of recommendation strength like Dr. Serdell gave me for brain surgery. 100 times out of 100 times, if this were my wife, this is exactly what I would do. Now, I don't want to get carried away. I'm just saying that didn't feel like sales. I like to recommend programs. I mentioned the All Distances program. Let me just role play it. Tom, you've had a detectable change. You were right. You mentioned kind of up close. You've had a detectable change in the distance, but a pretty significant one up close. And the good news is we know exactly what we need to do to bring this back to the perfect vision that's so important to you and to us. And as we think about moving forward, moving back to perfect vision, I'm going to recommend we move back in time a little bit to a lens that it more naturally progresses for us from those different distances, out in the distance, up close, points in between. It more closely replicates the way our eyes used to do that for us. And this lens is called an X, Y, and Z. It's also, I think, you're going to find in your prescription, because it's so much lighter and so much thinner, just a vastly more comfortable lens. And so I'm going to recommend the X, Y, and Z lens, and I think it's going to be a game breaker for you. The other thing that we know as we go along in life is we have to keep doing what we can to optimize light. And that becomes more and more needed helpfulness, that we optimize light. And there's a couple of recommendations I have. One is a photochromic treatment that just enables the lens to respond to the light. It cuts away a lot of the glare and a lot of the things that sort of steal away our good vision, and yet when we need more light, it allows it. It's something that I find that is a game breaker for me, and I'm going to strongly recommend for you. And also just a treatment to just eliminate reflection, glare, scratching, which we call an X, Y, and Z treatment. And this all comes as part of what we call an all distances program with the Light Perfect. I'm just going to circle that for you. And Kim, who is one of our lens specialists, talk with you a little bit more. So those are some things that I have in mind as we go forward. Questions could I answer for you about any of that? Not, did you want to go ahead with it? I hate when people talk about the doctor closing. You don't close a sale. That's not the business we're in. That's not what Dr. Serdell did. But you do close your recommendation, which is, have I made my judgment clear? So this is the part where I jump up on the table and dance if we were live together today, because the words I recommend, and I'd ask you to repeat them to me out loud. We'd put our hand to our mouth like we were eating great Italian food. There's an Italian restaurant right across the parking lot, and I can actually smell it tonight. They're obviously reopened. But we'd put our hand up, and I'd ask you to repeat after me, and we'd say, I recommend, and I also recommend. What questions do you have about either of those? If we could make our judgment that clear, and we could base it several slides ago, you know, when we talked about taking the patient care, taking the selling out of patient care, making it patient care instead of sales, and then setting the tone for better value, and then the feedback for better value. Man, we've just filled the holes in the glass. And then the clearer, better recommendations, the more definitive expression of our judgment. And then finally, it's just a matter of the patient retention methods. Let's queue up polling question number 4 here before we take a few questions and call it a night. I'm curious, do you pre-appoint most of your patients? This one's just a simple yes or no. Looks like 70% say yes. Is that right, Cheryl?
Yes, 70-30.
Wow. That is flipped. 70-30 is flipped from when I first, well, not even that long ago when I asked that question in a live audience in Toronto. And so I'm very, very pleased. And I'll just tell you this. A postcard, 15 to 30%. Telephone solicitation, what I call smile and dialing kind of recall, 40 to 60%. So the phone works. But pre-appointing and then following up to confirm, 70 to 95% on first contact. Well, wait a minute. We pre-appoint and ours isn't, our recall success isn't 95% on first contact. I think it's those two things we talked about it's not whether you're texting or emailing. We can have that conversation sometime about the delivery venues, but here's the thing, they all work. You know, if we want to do 2 or 3 different ways, I always recommend the phone if there's a bunch of holes in the schedule. Nothing will fill them faster than the phone. Nothing. Never has, never will. Smiling and dialing. But if we're pre-scheduling and we're doing what we talked about doing tonight, you know, that special welcome, the vision and future revision, and then the 4-part diagnostic feedback, what I'm doing, what I'm looking for, what I'm seeing, when I want to do it again. And then we do simply this. Tom, before you go, I just want to let you know that I'm very pleased with the outcome. And we're excited about, you know, some changes to bring us back to perfect vision. But most importantly, I'm just very pleased with the conditions of the structures in the eye and those things that just, well, they tell me where we're headed in terms of the future of vision. But these things can change so quickly and not show any symptoms. And that's when I worry most, because when it becomes symptomatic, we have often a problem. So I'm going to ask Cheryl if she would just go ahead and schedule a tentative time for the next eye health evaluation and, of course, vision exam while we're at it. Before you go, and that's the one way that I can make sure that we follow up and I don't overlook it. And, of course, if something's changed and we need to change the time, we can, but this way I make sure I don't forget it. Doctor, take recall onto you. Take it. I want to make sure that I don't overlook it. Take it onto you. Take it off the patient and put it onto you. And with the other methods we discussed in combination, then all we need is a few new patients. Which reminds me, real quickly, more referrals by design. I wonder, do you ever have patients tell you? Do you ever have patients ask you if you accept new patients? I wonder. Should have done a polling question on that one. Too late. We'll do that next time. Do you accept new patients? I always chuckle when I hear that because, oh, nope, sorry, we're too busy to accept any new patients. Of course we accept new patients. It's almost comical that they have to ask, but the fact that they have to ask is telling you something. It's telling you about the failure of the marketing plan. And so I like marketing rule number 2 and 3. I like a place where we say, hey, we give them a little piece that just reiterates our commitment to lifelong healthy vision and the relationships that we have with our patients above all else. And inviting them to pass that along and just know that we'll be here for the people you love. And if we make a point of that, and it doesn't have to be in poor taste, and we put a piece in their hand, it's a game changer. A little piece that reiterates that commitment and our gladness for that. It's a double-digit referral increaser, which is adding more water to the glass. And then finally, this Hershey bar. Remember that if we all look like chocolate chips, we need, it's the same chocolate, but we need to package differently. I love chocolate chips. Take a handful of them over nothing, but I'd rather have the Hershey. And so if you're really good at contact lenses, have some unique selling propositions. A guaranteed contact lens success program. Have some private label stuff that you do that gives you an opportunity for incomparability. If you really have high quality products, how about a lifetime temple to temple breakage warranty? They don't ever break them, they scratch them. Or how about a lifetime breakage warranty on the lenses of 2-year temple to temple breakage? Aren't we going to replace a bunch more than we did before? Nah, not really. We've tracked that a lot, but it's sure a nice way to distance yourself. Accessibility. I don't want you working 24/7, but have you tried early morning hours yet? Oh my gosh, if you have early morning people in the practice, your 6 a.m. hours will be booked before your 8 p.m. hours and before your Saturday. Why? Because early morning people always show up. They always pre-schedule. You don't need a full staff. You know, finish your day at 3 and start it at 6 once a week. You know, could we be more accessible and not just have to be at work all the time? I don't want you to do that, but I'd love to have better accessibility. Remember, it's not a battle, it's a war, or it's a war. It's a war over value. And so what I'd like to do is, I know we're coming to the end of it here and probably a minute or two over, and Cheryl, I'm sorry about that, but I'm still very willing to take a couple of minutes of questions here. Do you have any for me?
So Tom, the first question, does charging a fee for a no-show decrease the no-shows?
What an excellent question, and I'll be efficient with your time. It does. It does decrease no-shows, but it strains relationships. And there are certain situations, maybe right now while you're only booking half of your normal schedule, for example, there are certain situations where I think a fee for a no-show is probably appropriate. But what I'd like to do as our system in the practice is convert from fear to ambition, from being afraid I'll be charged to wanting to be there because you convinced me of the value. I'd rather, because I have to ask, well, what if you're running late? What if I come to the practice and you're 35 minutes late? Can I charge you, doctor? Can I charge you for being late? Well, then how come you can charge me? Well, so yes, it does decrease the no-show rate. And yes, there are times that might be, if it's becoming a problem or in times where we're scheduling different, I can go along with that as a strategy, but I'd rather convince them not to no-show than penalize them after doing it.
Great, thank you. We have another question. What do you think is a good target for capture rate? Do you see that changing in the new normal?
Oh, wow. So when I did the Capture This lecture, I did 10, it was a whistle stop across Canada, and I did 10 lectures, and it was called Capture This, and we learned that there was a plummeting capture rate. And I was asked to do the lecture because of that. And I refused to yield because I think capture rate is a decision before it's a set of strategies. And if we make capture rate a priority, which is a decision, and maybe you will and maybe you won't make that decision, but if you do make that decision, 50%. Do I see that changing? Oh, by the way, do I think it can be 60 or 70 in this day and age? I do. Why? Why would you say that? Because I see it. I mean, we all have the same internet competitors. Right? A competitor doesn't have to be across the road anymore, or even across the province or the continent. The competitor's a mouse click. And so, do I see capture rate changing in this new normal? If we make a decision for it not to change, then no, I do not. Do I think we live in a world where we can still see a 50% plus capture rate? I do believe that. Why? Because I see it every day.
Okay. We have another question. How can we talk to patients currently due to concerns about COVID-19 and while wearing masks?
You know, it's a really good, I don't mean to chuckle because this is funny. This is about as far from funny as it can be, but I have this visual of us face-to-face, mask-to-mask, right? And I saw my own physician the other day for a physical. I have to have some blood work done every year to keep an eye on a condition. And, so far so good. So that's good. My blood work came out great, but he didn't have a mask on. And I was really quite surprised. I wasn't necessarily taken back. I wasn't offended and I wasn't afraid, but I was surprised. I expected him to have one on. And so what I would say is deal with the obvious practicalities of the mask. I got to talk a little louder. I might be a little further away. I might have to use a little more volume. I might have to use a little more nonverbal. I might make a joke about, let me know if I just sound like I'm saying because I've never done this with a mask on before. Be human, be normal, be real. But other than that, don't change what you came here to do today or what you came into this room to say. Deal with the practicalities. If I were wearing a mask doing this, I'd be a little closer to the speakerphone. I'd be talking even a little louder than I normally do, which is loud. But I'd still talk about what I came here to talk about tonight. I really would.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time. We have one last question. What kind of impact does social media seem to have on practice growth, if any?
Does social media have, Cheryl, on what?
On practice growth.
Practice growth.
Right.
It has a considerable impact, not because it is social media, but because of the way we choose to leverage it. Social media will never replace some other forms of communication, and social media does not change what's important. But social media absolutely gives us an opportunity to reiterate what's important more specifically to certain people in ways that they might more desire to hear it, in delivery methods that they might more desire to hear it. So I will say that social media, although not as impactful as internal marketing, is anything you do to cause and sustain value, and value is the extent to which people perceive what you do as good. Social media gives us an opportunity to be valuable in additional ways, but it doesn't change what makes us valuable. So I think it can have a big impact on growth because it gives us an opportunity to further leverage who we are and what makes us preferable, but it doesn't change who we are or what makes us preferable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. At this time, I would like to thank you for your insightful presentation. And to everyone, the webinar will be posted on the OEO website within the next few weeks. Please complete our survey as you log off. Thank you for joining us. Good night.